Hey everyone, and welcome back to Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards and tell you are they any good in the Pauper format or not. Sometimes we do more than 10, but we'll see what our first card is and get started. It's Pinion Feast. For 4 and a green, you get an instant that says destroy target creature with flying and you bolster 2. What does bolster 2 do, you might ask? Well, you choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Man, I don't know. It's like a plummet that adds a couple of counters, right? That's what plummet does. Yeah. Plummet's 2 mana, 2 counters. I don't know if that makes it 3 mana worthy. Plummet was an instant too, so this just feels too expensive all the way around. I guess it was good and limited. I mean, you're playing a Tarkir set, right? Dragons Tarkir, so there are probably plenty of dragons around, a lot of flying. But I don't, too expensive for Pauper play. Let's go with like a 2.5. I think 2.5 feels like the most normal score for a Pauper card or for this kind of rating system, and that's what we're gonna give it. 2.5. Sky Shroud Ranger, single green mana for a 1/1 elf ranger. You can tap it to put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. That's pretty good. That's some interesting ramp. You know, we have the Land of War Elves, obviously, and that just adds mana. Being a mana dork, that's pretty good. But when you actually get to put lands on the field, then that's ramp that generally doesn't go away. I mean, yeah, there's some land destruction in Pauper, but for the most part, those are cards that stick around. They're the most protected cards on the battlefield, and so to have something that says, yeah, you just get to play more of the most protected cards on the battlefield, pretty good. The problem becomes when you run out of lands in your hand. If you don't have lands in your hand, you can't use this ability. And then this becomes not mana negative exactly, but it starts to lose out to a card like Land of War Elves, which is always going to give you that green mana every single time. We have another card. Oh, God, what is it? It is... Oh, I'm not gonna remember the name, but I am going to remember that it's a green card, and that I believe it's a 0/3. It comes into play. It gets to do this one time when it enters. It gets to come into play and do it. Where's the thing that lets me? Oh, here we go. Stats. Toughness is equal to 3. Power is equal to 0. Anybody want to help me out here on this one? There you go, Arboreal Grazer, the very first one. So yeah, this is a single green mana for a 0/3 with reach, and when he enters, you get to do that effect. You get to put a land onto the battlefield tapped. So this is a really nice turn 1 play because you're also getting a pretty good blocker out of the deal, in the same way that like Hard Evidence is a good turn 1 play for blue because you're getting a decent blocker and that card and that clue token. So Arboreal Grazer is a hell of a card, and you know, on turn 1 when you play this guy, you probably do have a couple lands in your hand if you kept a good hand. And while this is repeatable, how many times can you repeat that before you aren't able to get enough lands? Like, yes, you get a land drop each turn. Do you have enough card draw in your deck to be able to make this work time over time over time? And the answer is probably no. But it is a cool card. Also cool that, you know, shows up in Tempest, and then its next one is 10th edition. That's a long way away. And now we're even a long way away from 10th edition. So it's probably about time to reprint this somewhere, Wizards. But yeah, man, this one's $1.70. Huh. That's interesting. It's a good card. It's a good card. I don't think it really shows, and it's also an elf. You know, we have plenty of elf decks in Pauper. The problem with those elf decks is they generally don't care about playing the lands all that much. Although this is interesting because those decks also are returning lands to their hand. You know, you got the Kyrian Ranger that makes you return the forest, and then you could tap this guy down to play that forest an additional time. You played that forest already for turn, and then the Kyrian Ranger bounces it back to your hand. Now you can use this guy to put it back down and keep, not exactly looping it with the Kyrian Ranger. I guess kind of you could. That's interesting. That's an interesting way of potentially keeping that loop going. I wonder if this actually does see any play in elf decks. I don't think it does. I'm not an elf deck expert, but I'm gonna give this a pretty decent score. I'm gonna give this like a 5.8 because it totally could go in a Pauper deck, and maybe it really does go in elves, and I just haven't been paying attention. But it seems like a solid card to me. Next is Moment of Heroism. 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. That's a decent little combat trick. I like combat tricks that give lifelink. That's a cool ability to get. Generally you probably want something that keeps your creature alive or makes your opponent's creatures dead. So Death Touch or Indestructible. If you're going for protection spells, obviously you're looking for Indestructible or Hexproof. There or protection just in general. There are a number of things that you might want from a combat trick, and life gain isn't necessarily one of them. But I think it's just nice. I think it's if you have your opponent swinging in, and they have got lethal on board or something like that, and you're able to play a Moment of Heroism on one of your creatures to block and kill one of your opponent's creatures, and also to gain a bunch of life that then stops that lethal from happening, that's pretty cool. That is kind of one real situation where you'd want that. Yeah, you can use it offensively too, and it certainly works there, but offensively, lifelink doesn't do anything that it doesn't help you in the same way that Trample would, or it doesn't help you in the same way that First Strike might. So it is kind of a lower ability when it comes to combat tricks, but I still like it generally. I'm going to give this thing a 3.4, I believe. That's not a bad one. Siegecraft is 3 and a white for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+4. You get 2 holy strengths for the price of 4 holy strengths. That's bad. That's just bad. I don't like that at all. Yeah, that sucks. That sucks. I'm gonna give this a 1.6. That's a big waste of your mana right there. And if your opponent kills the creature, then you've lost a lot of mana value at that as well. Terrible. Attended Knight is 2 and a white for a 2/2 human knight with first strike. When this creature enters, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. I think this is pretty good. I've talked for a number of different episodes about how I think knight decks in Pauper are close. They just need a couple of pieces. They need some reason for the knights to all come together. Some sort of tribal boost. Whether it's like a lord kind of effect that gives them all +1/+1, or something that gives them some kind of effect like they all get first strike or they all get whatever. And we just don't have that in Pauper yet. You have that in plenty of other formats. You have enough cards that do those things in other formats, standard or commander or things like that. But in Pauper, you have a lot of good cards that are knights, but no reason to throw them all together. This one, I think, is solid. You're getting 3/3 worth of stats for 3 mana. 2/2 of that has that first strike. This thing is blinkable or bounceable. It's probably a little too expensive for bouncing, but blinkable at least to continue getting more bodies off it. It's okay. It's just a solid okay card. And I think a solid okay card here would get something like a 3. Yeah, I think it's a 3. Could go higher if the Knights decks become a thing, but so far they haven't. Greedy Freebooter is a fantastic card. It's a single black mana for a 1/1 human pirate. When this creature dies, you scry 1 and you create a treasure token. Those are pretty good things for just a dies trigger. So you immediately think mono black sacrifice, right? And that's a pretty good place to start thinking about this. Mono black sack, though, mostly cares about just having more creatures, so they'll choose the Doom Traveler variants, the black ones, obviously, like Infestation Sage, but they want those kinds of cards that are going to continue giving them more creatures, the Nezumi Link Breakers and such. So Greedy Freebooter, despite giving you some card selection out of the Scry and some ramp, or ritualish effect, I guess, out of the treasure token, it's a really good turn one play. The mono black sack decks probably don't need it. Maybe you could probably make some sacrifice deck that's a little bit more focused on, who's the 2-mana guy that whenever you sacrifice anything, it gets a +1/+1 counter. That's not bad, because then at least you get the treasure token here, which also sacrifices itself for the mana, and that's another +1/+1 counter for that guy. But I think Mono Black Sack has more or less figured it out, and that cards like Nezumi Linkbreaker, when they came out in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, they kind of pushed Greedy Freebooter out of the format. There's probably some other decks that can make good use of Greedy Freebooter. I just haven't seen them yet. It's also really sad because Outlaws of Thunder Junction was not that far from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, so this guy did not have his day in the sun in Pauper for very long, it seems. Still, a really good card, can be played in Commander as like an aristocrat's target. Really easy thing to sacrifice, really easy thing to bring back with lots of different effects, and you can kind of keep looping that stuff. Has been good in Standard. It's just a good all-around card, and I think that applies to Pauper too, even if it doesn't really get played these days in Pauper, to my knowledge. I'm almost positive it doesn't really see any real play. I'm still going to give it, though, a 4.7. Right on the cusp of Pauper playability, and I think you could probably find a solid spot, and this card would do well in your deck, even if it's not, the most amazing card in that deck. Rite of the Serpent is our next card. 4 and double black for a sorcery. Destroy target creature. If that creature had a +1/+1 counter on it, you create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Whew. That's kind of specific for 6 mana. Hey, this is some incredible art, I want to say. Seth McKinnon killing it over here. But 6 mana to destroy a creature at sorcery speed. You're paying 2 murders? Yeah, you're paying 2 murders to murder one guy, but also only at sorcery speed. And then if and only if that creature that you killed had a +1/+1 counter on it, which, +1/+1 counters are pretty darn common, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. Then you can get a 1/1, a 1/1 that has nothing else. Like, it's a snake, but it doesn't have Death Touch. Lots of those snake tokens have Death Touch. So this feels ridiculously overcosted. We've seen a couple of Tarkir cards today, from different Tarkir sets, but they've all kind of been overcosted. This is bad. The art's maybe the only good part of it. I'm going to give this a 1.7, I think. And it's really this mana cost. This is ridiculous. This thing, I think you could get away with making this 3 mana, like 1 and double black, because you'd still generally prefer murder because it's an instant and nobody plays murder anyway. But now here's a murder variant that's sorcery speed, but can potentially give you a 1/1 as well. I think you could justify making this a 3 mana spell instead of a 6 mana spell. 6 mana. Oh, get out of here. Shamble Shark is a fantastic name. It's It's Simic mana, green and a blue for a 2/1 shark crab with flash and evolve. So evolve says whenever a creature you control enters, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. If you've been playing Secret to Strixhaven lately, it's a little bit similar to Increment. Increment's more about the mana value of the spell that you play, so it can be any type of spell. Evolve specifically wants you to play bigger and bigger creatures to make the evolve creatures bigger and bigger as well. But it is a nice thing where you can play a creature and then it continues to, I guess, evolve, but it continues to grow. So it's like you're getting a lot more value out of your cheap creatures than you would in other scenarios. You play a white, play white weenie deck, and that 1/1 is generally going to just stay a 1/1 for the whole game. But now you've got this card, and it's like, yeah, I start as a 2/1, but I can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, if you get to the point where this thing's like a 5/4 that you still paid 2 mana for, that's pretty solid. The flash speed makes this also a little bit of a combat trick sometimes. Your opponent might swing in with some guys thinking that you're wide open, and you can flash this guy in to block one of them. You don't really get the evolve value at that point, but it is a way to block and potentially trade with a creature that they didn't expect to be traded with. That's kind of cool. But if you do play it early, it is also protect. Just flash kind of gives your creature some sort of protection in that your opponent doesn't get as many opportunities to respond to it. They can counter it or they can kill it before the end of their turn. But then it's going to be your turn, and you have all your mana available to either protect this yourself or just to start swinging in. Shambles Shark seems pretty fun, and not just fun to say, but it's not amazing. It's still, at the end of the day, this is a pretty French vanilla card. Generally just a vanilla card that gets a little bit bigger each time. That's... Despite having flash, this thing is too slow. And for that, I think we're going to end up giving this thing like a 2.4. It's cute, but not very good. Dwarven Vigilantes is 2 and a red for a 2/2 dwarf. When this creature attacks, or whenever this creature attacks and isn't blocked, you may have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature. If you do, this creature assigns no combat damage this turn. I've never really liked this kind of effect because think of the scenario where this happens. This creature has to attack and not be blocked. This creature, unlike when you're thinking about ninjutsu things, and like when you're ninjutsuing in a creature that isn't blocked, it's usually because that creature is flying or has some kind of unblockability. This creature does not have those things. This is an on the ground regular ass 2/2 that you're paying 3 mana for. 3 mana for a 2/2, which is not a great rate to begin with. But you're putting just this normal creature on the ground. Your opponent has had a number of turns to be able to put some blockers on the ground. And they have to have put some blockers on the ground because this thing only works. I mean, you either deal the 2 damage to the opponent or you use its effect to say, I don't need that damage to the opponent. I would rather do the damage to a creature. But at that point, they have to have creatures on the board. And if they have creatures on the board, they could probably just block this guy. That's not good. That's not very good at all. I think this also really has trouble. Well, no, I was going to say it has trouble with trample, but it doesn't because trample means that it needs to be blocked for it to go over. So that's not really a problem. But still, this is too expensive for nothing, for kind of nothing. It is just a vanilla creature, but if you are unblocked, you can do 2 damage to what? I don't know. I think this sucks. I really do. I'm going to give this a 1.4. It's a trap. It's a really bad card. And I think they've more or less gotten away from these kinds of effects unless the creature has some sort of natural evasion. And then it's a real choice. Do I actually want to do this little bit of damage, or do I want to get this nice little effect instead and not deal the combat damage? So Dwarven Vigilantes, I guess, crawled so others could walk and or run, but this card is pretty uniquely terrible. Kyrian Sentinel, not exactly the card that we were talking about earlier, but close, is 1 and a green for a 2/1 elf druid. This creature enters, you add 1 mana of any color. That can be dangerous. This mana fixes you a little bit. If you have ways of reducing reducing the cost of green spells, this thing is essentially free. That gets it into that kind of stormy territory. If you are able to bounce this thing back to your hand and then continue playing it, that can loop in some way that could potentially be pretty dirty for some stormy style effects. I don't think this shows up in elf decks because I think they don't need it. I think they're fast enough and they can figure things out mana wise better than what Kyrian Sentinel can give you. But I think Kyrian Sentinel potentially could see some combo potential. Maybe it has seen some combo potential. But it's a card that you always have to respect when you're evaluating cards like this because of the ability of generating mana. Now, this is not going to be able to, it should not be able to generate mana for free. You can usually reduce the generic cost here, but harder, especially at common, to reduce the actual green cost that this thing costs. So I don't think you're ever getting to a point where you can just play this guy and get free mana of any color out of the deal and be able to loop that in a way of getting infinite mana. But from a storm perspective, from like a Manamorphose perspective, where you're able to pay the cost and then get that same cost back as value, where it's mana neutral, I think once you get to that situation, now you kind of have to start respecting it a little bit more because that just adds to that storm count, and then you can play one of the not banned storm cards in Pauper, and then that does pretty darn well. It's only gotten this one printing in Invasion. It's only 9 cents, so I don't think it's caught on enough where people have gone, oh, we got to buy up every single copy of Kyrian Sentinel. But I still think it's worth considering if you're playing some kind of combo-y deck. I'm just going to hedge my bets a little bit here, give it a 5.1, and I think we'll call it there. No bonus card today because I'm going to try to rip through a number of these and get you set up for the rest of the week. Anyway, see you later.